Hello, Woodbury community. This is Griffin Lamp. I'm a junior here. I'm studying filmmaking, but I also really find politics very interesting. So today I'm just going to break down the two different sides of the political spectrum, and specifically the two candidates who are running for president, because if you didn't know, we got a pretty big election coming up in November. So it's coming up fast, about 40 days. And I'm just going to run through the policy guidelines, basically, or the policy positions of Donald J. Trump, who's on the right, and then Joe Biden. I don't know what his middle name is, probably something weird, who's on the left. So let's start with Donald Trump. Donald Trump, as he's talked about a couple billion times, he's talked a lot about wanting to build a wall on the southern border, which we already have fencing, but what he wants to do is he wants to build a physical wall out of, I assume, brick or mortar or something like that. And he wants to put it along the border as a form of border, I don't know, keep the border more secure. And before I go any further, I know you're probably wondering, you're like, okay, this kid, how objective can he be? I'll be as objective as possible. If you have made not already know, I do kind of lean more left. I'm more of a Bernie guy, but I'm just going to give you the straight facts about which way these guys lean and what their policy positions are and how popular they are with the electorate. So basically, the border wall idea that Donald Trump has is quite popular. It does very well among conservatives. They favor it very much so. So that's one thing that he's been running on for a long time now. Another thing he wants to run on is, or he's been running on and wants to sell to the public, is lower corporate tax rates. So the highest corporate tax rate, I believe, under Obama was about 40%. Trump's been steadily lowering that for the past 4 years since he's been in office. So that's one other thing he's running on is lower taxes. By the way, if you're curious, I'm looking at my notes here, so don't worry. Another thing that Trump's running on is support of Israel. So Trump is a very strong supporter of Israel in terms of funding, in terms of just their policies that they prioritize, and that's one thing that the conservatives are also very for. The conservatives tend to be very pro-Israel in terms of giving them more funding and things of that sort. So that's one thing that Trump is running on as well. Trump's also running on looser gun laws. He hasn't talked about this a whole lot, but one thing he's talked about a little bit is how he does not want to ban the AR-15, which is an assault rifle that is quite common and loved by, unfortunately, both school shooters and just gun owners in general. And just as a quick side note, common misconception about the AR-15 is that the AR stands for assault rifle. That is incorrect. From what I remember, it stands for armament rifle, which I think is the name of the brand. So it does not stand for assault rifle, so you learn something new every day. Hopefully that's something new you guys didn't know. Trump's also against banning high-capacity magazines. He's talked about that a little bit. So, like a 30-round magazine for a semi-automatic weapon, he is not for banning. The Democrats are. So we'll go into that in a second with Joe Biden. Um, Trump hasn't really talked much about gay rights or things like that. Surprisingly, unlike other conservative presidents, he hasn't really had a strong stake in the ground about how he's against it or for it. He's not the most religious person. Anybody who's religious will tell you that. So that's kind of the couple main policy positions that Trump's running on. If you agree with them, great. If you don't, okay. Um, that's just kind of the down the line what he's talking about. Being in California, very few people around us are going to be believing in these kind of things. But so there's conservatives who live here. I'm pretty sure. Uh, so what is Trump like selling besides his policy positions? Well, one thing that Trump talks about a lot is law and order and running against the radical left. So his whole position is that like the left has gone way too far, and that if Joe Biden's elected, it'll just be anarchy and things will just go crazy, basically. So that's the main thing that Donald Trump's running against. And he's talking about kind of keeping law and order, being very pro-police, and all these different things, very pro-military, and things like that. So, and that actually goes very well, it gels very well with conservatives. Trump's approval rating, last time I checked, was about 88%, which if you're curious, that's very, very, very high. That's Ronald Reagan actually had those numbers. He's like the token like conservative president. So Trump's doing very well among his base. Don't let anybody fool you. He is very much in this election. So get out and vote. If you don't believe in these things, get out and vote. Let's go to the other side of the spectrum, the liberal side of the spectrum, or the so-called liberal side of the spectrum. We're going to talk about Joe Biden. Joe Biden isn't so much running on policy specifics, unlike his main opponent Bernie Sanders, who just recently dropped that a little while ago. His main point of view is returning to normalcy, which that kind of means that he wants to go back to a time when the world was less quote-unquote embarrassed about the president of the United States. Joe Biden wants to kind of return to the Obama years where the president wasn't always tweeting and all these different things. So this gels very well with the more affluent white suburban voter. So that's the main demographic that Joe Biden is going for. Whereas on the other side, Donald Trump is doing very well among evangelical Christians and generally white evangelical Christians. Those are his main voting base. So a couple policy positions that I do know about with Joe Biden is he does want stricter gun laws. He has talked about being for banning the AR-15 assault rifle and banning high-capacity magazines. So those are a couple of policy specifics that I could find. But surprisingly enough, it's pretty hard to find policy positions that Joe Biden supports because he's pretty vague on that stuff. Which that's not a belief; that's just a fact. So that could be a I think that's going to cause him trouble in November, to be honest with you, because I think the way that you get votes is by having very specific policy positions that are going to make your base excited. By the way, if you hear that noise, that's my air conditioning running, and I wanted to finish this before it started, but I didn't do it in time. Anyway, so Joe Biden's main selling point, like I said, is a return to normalcy on the main stage, which is pretty appealing to some people. He talks about chivalry a lot, well, not even chivalry, but more like the moral fabric of America, and he believes that like Trump has made the United States less moral, and his main thing is he wants to bring back like the polite politician, whatever, if that makes sense. And Joe Biden's really made no qualms about the fact that he's not like one of the more liberal candidates like Bernie Sanders. He just to talk about how he's much more on the more moderate lane of the Democratic Party, along with the lines of like Hillary Clinton and even Barack Obama. Barack Obama ran on a very liberal message. Just so you don't think that I'm talking out of my ass here, Barack Obama actually ran on a very liberal message, and he ended up moving to the right on a lot of issues and ended up being much more of a corporate Democrat. Just look into his voting record, and you'll see that this is actually pretty true. Depressingly enough, in my point of view. But if not, then that's great. If you like that, that's fine. Anyway. So that's kind of the main specifics of Joe Biden versus Donald Trump. I kind of want to go into how this is going to turn out. Now, it's anybody's guess who's going to win at this point because, I mean, if you would have asked me 2 months ago, I would have said Joe Biden because the main voting issue is COVID, and Trump's approval rating on COVID is about 18%. But, I mean, Joe Biden's got so many gaffes, the poor guy. He's not really standing for anything. I mean, if somebody was to say, what is Joe Biden standing for, besides a return to normalcy, like, no one really knows. So I would say that it's anybody's game right now. If you told me to, like, tell you right now who I think would win, I would say probably Joe Biden. That's only because I think that he might win the Rust Belt, and the Rust Belt is the main, like, automation states. They're the ones that, let's see, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and all those ones that are up in the Northeast. So those states that went to Trump last time against Hillary Clinton, when Trump was running against Hillary Clinton in 2016, those states just barely went to Trump by a very small margin. And I think that Joe Biden's going to do a little bit better than Hillary Clinton. And just to kind of break down the electoral map, the Democrats always win the coast. So they always win like Washington, Oregon, California. That's like 80 electoral votes right there. And then they always win like New York and like all those different ones along the coasts. And that's like another probably 100 electoral votes. So they always get to about 180, but then where Democrats need to win the election is they need to win those Rust Belt states like Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan, because those make up a good chunk of the electorate. And if Joe Biden can win there, because he has a pretty good, actually, trade record, I think he could win that. I think that's why he'll win the election. The main thing that could kill him, though, and like really destroy him, is if Trump talks about NAFTA, which NAFTA was a trade deal that was actually made under Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, and Joe Biden, which outsourced a lot of jobs because the goal was they wanted to, it kind of like lowered world poverty a lot because the jobs went to other countries with cheaper labor costs like China and places like that. And that was good for those countries, and that's fantastic, but it was bad for America because the tricky thing with those things is that they don't want to pay their workers like $12 an hour or $8 an hour. They would rather pay them 10 cents an hour in other countries. So that made there be a lot less automation jobs and unionized jobs in the Rust Belt. So the way that Trump could beat Joe Biden, if I was to be the campaign manager for Trump, I would say you've got to just hit him on NAFTA and all these on these trade deals that have been really, really bad for the American worker. Speaking of how Trump could win, I don't know. He keeps trying to dig up this like culture war thing of like the radical left and how like Joe Biden's the radical left. It's like, come on now, this guy is like the most boring Catholic dude ever. Like Joe Biden is by his own admission not a radical leftist. So that's just dead in the water approach. So Trump's going to drop that. Trump also, if you guys don't already know, his main campaign slogan was "Make America Great Again," which was a really excellent campaign slogan in my opinion because it kind of made the argument that like things aren't great in America, and if you like me, I'm gonna make America the best place of all time, and we're just gonna go back to like the time when we all drove Cadillacs or whatever. And but now Trump's running on the new campaign slogan called "Keep America Great" or CAG, and besides the fact that CAG is a hilarious acronym. That's a terrible slogan because if anybody's been awake during 2020, they realize that, I mean, we've got a depression going on, we got COVID, we got the protest, we got all these different problems. So if Trump wants to win, he's got to ditch that slogan right away because it's just complete trash. So yeah, I would say that it's anybody's game right now, but these are the main policy prescriptions. If you want, looser gun laws, more border enforcement, and lower taxation, Trump's your guy. If you'd like stricter gun laws and looser abortion rights, that was another thing I talked about. Trump's much more anti-abortion than Joe Biden. Trump's very anti-abortion. Then Joe Biden's your guy. He's not a swashbuckling leftist like Bernie Sanders, but if you want to vote along these lines, then I think Joe Biden's your guy. Have fun voting. If you have any questions, feel free to hit me up on Instagram. It's Griffin_lamp. I love talking politics all the time, anytime. I'll talk to you judgment free, whether you're on the left or the right. All right. Have fun out there, guys. See ya.